Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your Disrupt MC and TechCrunch senior writer, Jordan Crook.
Yeah, you guys are my troopers. We're here, it's day 3. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning or something, right? And you guys are my troopers, so screw Sam, you guys are my new favorites, okay? Same stuff that we've been going over, hashtag TC Disrupt. The bathrooms are gonna be wide open and ready for you all day long, so enjoy that. It's your right as humans. And we're just gonna get right into the mix. Remember yesterday, George Hotz was talking about a company called Cruise? We're going to bring him out and see what he has to say about everything. So please welcome to the stage Kyle Vogt from Cruise and our moderator, Darrell Etherington.
All right. Welcome, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so did you drive yourself here, or did your cruise car drive you here?
Not this time. I like to stay on top of the rideshare market and see what's going on. I took an Uber today.
Nice. So I think Jordan mentioned George was up here, and we should address that. But I think actually for this audience there might be a more pertinent question. A lot of startups here. You have had a fair amount of startup success, I think, by any measure. And so I just want you to tell the entire crowd here in, let's say 3 words or less, how to get to $2 billion exits.
Don't give up.
You nailed it. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Don't give up. But seriously, like you have had, I can't even think of another example of this kind of success. So can you just walk us through a bit how you started out and kind of like how that came together, how you got interested in startups to begin with, and how you joined, Justin TV, and then from there on?
Yeah, well, I guess behind every company is a really interesting backstory, but in this case, I was in college at MIT. I was actually working on self-driving cars, doing some research there, and I met Justin Kahn and Emmett Shear, who had just sold their last company, Kiko, on eBay.
Right.
Emmett's actually speaking next.
Yes.
And Justin had this idea for a crazy reality TV show, and they needed some, person from MIT to build this camera that could live stream.
So you just fit the role of person from MIT?
Yeah. some tech guy who can build this thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was an interesting challenge, and they had sold their company, and so I thought these guys are rock stars.
Yes.
And so I dropped out to start Justin TV with them.
Nice. But you also mentioned there you were actually working on self-driving cars before you joined Justin TV?
Yeah, it goes back even before that. Like, I was 13 years old and driving with my dad from Kansas City, where I grew up, to Las Vegas to compete in BattleBots. And on the way, we were on a straight road with nothing but pavement and yellow lines for, 11 hours or something.
Yeah.
And I thought this is something that a computer would be really good at. And the next year built a little kiddie car, the kind that kids can ride on. That had a Pentium 233 and a webcam in it, and it would actually sort of drive along the lines in a parking lot.
Wow.
So I've wanted to do this forever, and the technology wasn't really there until very recently.
And so were you thinking about it throughout, like as you were doing this, as you were helping build Justin TV and Twitch, and were you thinking like, this problem is still one that I think needs to be solved and I think computers are really good at?
Yeah, back in 2004 when we did the DARPA Grand Challenge, you had a rack of servers in the back of a pickup truck, and then 3 kilowatts of cooling equipment just to run it all. But then when I took another look, about 10 years later, Moore's Law had kicked in, and things are small, fast, and cheap. And so it seemed like we were just on the cusp of having the technology to actually pull this off and make self-driving cars real.
And so actually that also leads into kind of what George was talking about, because so what he called you out pretty blatantly, pretty energetically, and I think his main complaint was that you had sort of begun with this vision of, we're going to outfit cars with this kit, and it will be available to essentially any car eventually, right?
Yeah.
$10,000. You started with some Audis, and then the vision changed very quickly.
Yeah.
So, first of all, how did it feel to be called out like that? What do you think of that and the validity of his argument there?
Well, I don't think that's a big deal, but there's, it's an interesting question, right? Why sell a company and partner with a major OEM?
Yeah.
And what we realized, having gone through a very similar path, which is retrofitting vehicles with various levels of self-driving technology, is that it's not scalable. And ultimately, to achieve what we want with driverless cars, you have to deploy it at scale.
So what do you want with driverless cars?
I mean, driverless cars, we talked about the benefits. I mean, they've been all over the news, but like basically,
You want it to be everywhere is what you're saying.
yeah, you don't achieve those societal benefits like making transportation safer and more accessible until you've got millions of cars out there. And retrofitting cars one by one isn't going to get us there.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So, and those the advantages that kicked in and that made it possible to build self-driving cars affordably to begin with don't necessarily. That's not going. You don't see a state at which that will also help you bring kind of aftermarket additions to existing vehicles. Like that just isn't in the cards.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, the level of integration you need to build a driverless car that is safe and something that you would trust without a driver at all. Not something where you have to pay attention and be ready to take over, but something when you can truly remove the driver and know that it's not going to make mistakes. That takes a level of integration to the vehicle and validation that you just can't do with a retrofit.
Okay, so that kind of explains why GM then, right? Which is another question. But why GM specifically? I mean, there are many other automakers out there. What does GM offer?
Well, GM's got some great leadership, like Mary and Dan Ammon at the top, who really understand that autonomous is going to be transformative for the automotive industry. That's one thing. Plus, they have the Chevrolet Bolt, this electric vehicle platform, which had big news yesterday for having pretty fantastic range.
Yep.
And then the third piece is sort of this partnership with Lyft, which I think is going to be very valuable. I think the three components you need to launch a driverless rideshare service at scale are the core technology, which Cruise brings to the table, the ability to manufacture these vehicles at scale, which we get with GM, and then the partnership with Lyft, which provides the demand side of that and customers.
Okay. So also about the other companies and competitors in general, I think that maybe GM has been less specific or less articulate about the timeline for when these things are going to happen. Like typically what we see from you is kind of a tease, like here are the cars, they're being tested, they're on the roads, but very tight-lipped beyond that. Whereas Ford will say, 2019, you're going to have a self-driving taxi fleet on the road. Uber is another great example. Just this very morning, cars are picking up passengers in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Driverless, 2 drivers in the car, like a safety driver and the engineer, but driverless, operating driverless, right? So why are you guys a little more reserved with the pronouncements?
Well, every month I read all the articles, and I think we've reached the peak of the hype cycle, and the next month it tops that, right? So there's a lot being said, but we're not actively participating in this marketing hype. I think the thing that I look for as an engineer and someone who's been in the trenches working on this technology is, when someone actually takes the drivers out of the vehicle and has a vehicle operating with no drivers, whether it's on a public road or even a test site, then you know that they as a company or a producer of this technology are actually comfortable enough with it. They've done the validation and safety work that it's close to being ready to deploy and use as a service. Yeah. Until then, when we've got demonstrations with people in the car or engineers behind the wheel, it's impressive and it's great for marketing, but there's no substance there yet. And I'm waiting for that. So
then what about the timelines? Are you skeptical of kind of some of the stated dates we've seen?
Depends on who you're talking about. I think
Ford specifically.
I'm not going to comment on them specifically, but I think in general, this technology is evolving very rapidly. If you look back when we started Cruise about 3 years ago, people were assuming this linear trajectory, linear improvement, and it looked like self-driving cars were 20 years out. Mm-hmm. What actually happened is we're on this exponential curve, and so pretty much everyone is sort of slowly ratcheting back their timelines from 2020 and going sooner in many cases. Yeah. And so I think that's going to continue, and this is going to happen a lot sooner than most people think. So does that mean that you won't even announce a timeline? Like we'll just, let's say next year, you'll be like, hey, here it is, it's available, self-driving GM cars. I mean, we're not going to announce a timeline, but having a driverless car out on the road is not something you want to rush or try to fit into a timeline. We're concerned about making sure when the cars are out there, they're safe and validated and integrated into the vehicle so that you would trust one. You'd feel comfortable getting in one without a driver behind the wheel. And what are the key hurdles still remaining to achieve that, in your opinion? I think we're at the stage now where we're seeing a lot of companies build proof of concepts, and so you can see the technology working, you can see the pieces coming together. A lot of the components aren't automotive grade yet.
And that's what, I mean, George says he can do it with consumer grade, right? But the automotive grade, explain a bit about why that's important.
Well, there's a big distinction between, a driver assist feature or a fancy cruise control system compared to a car that is fully driverless. It's probably 100 times more complicated in terms of the safety and validation work and also the maturity level of the software. And so, you can't really compare them or put them in the same bucket.
And is that kind of a realization that you've had since joining GM? Because, I mean, what did that show you about how car companies work and how cars are made?
Yeah, well, we were faced with the opportunity to sort of try to go it alone as a startup and have that pride and prestige of being an independent company and trying to become the next Google. Or when we learned more about the complexities involved in building a car, just team up with a company that's been doing it for decades and has that process figured out. But the more I got involved with GM, the more I learned that it is going to be a long process to build a fully integrated, safe vehicle. That's what we're here to do. And ultimately, doing it, partnering with a company like GM is going to get that, life-saving technology to market more quickly.
But is that not frustrating for you? I mean, given your background, given, you're here, you operate here,
yeah.
in a very fast-paced environment, that must be frustrating at some point.
It's frustrating, but it's the right way to do it.
Okay, so it's acceptable frustration.
Yeah.
All right. So if the innovation theater, is the innovation theater ultimately damaging to the progress of self-driving cars and the development overall, or is it just sort of a distraction?
Which innovation?
Like innovation theater, when the other companies that are doing this kind of marketing effort and this sort of...
Not entirely. I think it's great for the industry because it brings attention to it. I've seen a lot of new startups enter the space. I've seen recent college grads decide that they want to enter the field of self-driving cars, which was pretty small and esoteric as of maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's going to further accelerate the overall development of the technology and hopefully bring it to market sooner.
Has that been a challenge, is finding people with not only the interest but the actual skills to do this kind of thing?
Yeah, as you can imagine, it's pretty competitive now.
Yeah.
But what we have at Cruise is kind of interesting because I think it's the perfect storm of technology, a fast-moving technology company, coupled to a company that has the ability to manufacture those vehicles at scale. And so if you're an engineer and you're trying to decide what you want to do and which company you want to work with, it's really a question of, do you want to work for a company where your work is likely to see the light of day in a customer product, right. Or do you like solving interesting problems? And that's sort of a personal question. Okay.
So actually getting to that, with Sebastian Thrun was on stage as well, and he was talking about them trying to kind of build a pipeline. Like,
yeah.
Is that helpful for you guys as well, or what do you think about these efforts to bring in and to make it more kind of democratized in the building of the talent?
Again, I think it's great. I think anytime there's more people coming into a space, more people thinking about it, and he's doing his part to help educate people and bring them up to speed on the state of the art in the space, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah. And what about, would you hire like people coming out of that nano degree program?
I think that would be a good start, but there's more to that just a nano degree. It's like, to work in the field of computer science or programming, you need a little bit more than like a crash course to be a good engineer.
Okay, so it would be a decent starting point, but then you would need some proof to back it up.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just talk more generally about your experience and about the experience of kind of the people that you've worked with in the past. I mean, you guys have become, Michael Siebel is now the CEO of YC, right?
As of yesterday. Yeah, that's great.
And we have Emmett upstage or on stage next with Twitch. So, I mean, what are you guys, are you now the PayPal Mafia? Are you the new generation of PayPal Mafia? Do we see this becoming like, are you going to go out there and help and spawn a new generation of innovators?
I wouldn't say that. I think the PayPal guys are a little bit ahead of us. But no, it's great. Michael and Emmett are my co-founders from Justin TV, and we were 10 years into that original journey. And I think, all the talk about venture funds recently, saying how they take 10 years to mature and really see the fruits of that initial labor and those investments, I think it's kind of the same thing with a group of entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah. Right. So you're not getting the itch then. You don't feel like you need to jump out, start something else.
Oh, absolutely not. I'm here to start what I finish, or finish what I started.
Okay. So to that, can you give us any updates on kind of progress that you guys have made since you've been joined up with GM?
Yeah, I mean, another benefit of being a part of this company with backing and resources, we can move more quickly, especially when it comes to expanding what we're doing. So now I think we've got close to 30 vehicles operating both in San Francisco and Scottsdale, Arizona, And we've more than doubled the size of our team here in San Francisco from around 40 to over 100.
Good progress.
Quickly. Yeah.
So how many miles, I guess, aggregate have you guys driven?
We don't talk about miles as much because what we try to do is throw our vehicles in the most challenging urban driving scenarios, which is, downtown San Francisco is a great example of that, to sort of accelerate that feedback cycle of you see something that the car doesn't handle well, take it back to the lab, work on it, and try again.
What about some colder climates? I think you're in San Francisco, Arizona right now, right? But relatively safe in terms of the weather. So are you looking anywhere else? Maybe the north, maybe Toronto, where I'm at?
Yeah, you can imagine things like that might come soon.
Okay, so you're not giving me much more on this.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, and just a question kind of about, because I think one thing that's come up recently when we've been looking at all these projects is that people have very different ways to collect the data necessary in the driving time. Are you guys getting driving data beyond kind of your test vehicles? Like, I mean, GM again, right? You have huge fleets, you have rental fleets. Is that an advantage? Are you getting a lot of stuff even not from non-autonomous testing cars?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some interesting stuff going on. We have, the work that's going on with Maven and Lyft.
Right.
We also have OnStar, which is a pretty powerful asset if you think about it. It's sort of this dark horse where we've got something like 7 or 8 million connected vehicles with cameras on them out in the wild.
Yeah.
And so there's some pretty powerful opportunities there.
And you mentioned Maven too. So Maven, have you done any kind of work directly with them? Maven, for people who might not know, is GM's in-house car sharing service, sort of like a Zipcar type service with GM vehicles exclusively. So are you guys working directly with them on any projects?
Yeah, we're very integrated with them. They're sort of our on-the-ground infrastructure experts, and they have a lot of experience working with Lyft, with the Express Drive program. So it's pretty neat to have all these organizations bundled up under one shop.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, I think to some people it might seem like GM is kind of spreading its bets. Would you say it's like maybe the future of mobility will look like this, maybe it'll look like that, and we are kind of covered no matter? Or is it more all of these things will eventually funnel into a final product?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty well tied together. As I mentioned, you've got those sort of three elements, the manufacturing vehicles at scale, the autonomous technology, and the rideshare platform. Yeah. And so they're pretty well integrated. And I think that, we've said before, and I still think this is the case, that rideshare is sort of the right entry point for driverless vehicle technology.
So is that what you see? Future transportation, what does it look like, let's say, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago? 25,
30 years. I hope at that point we've got to the point where we're starting to pull the human drivers off the road.
Okay, just starting to? It's going to take that long?
Well, it's going to take some time. One of the things that we talk about a lot is all the benefits of driverless car technology, but the reality is you don't unlock the true potential until it's almost entirely driverless vehicles on the road.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have vehicles driving really tightly spaced and packing 4 to a 2-lane road.
Yeah, you can't do those magic things with the traffic lights and
until
everything.
you get the humans off the road.
Yeah.
Like the dumb humans out of the way.
I agree 100%. How do we do that? Because people are very particular and precious about their cars.
I think this is going to follow a typical adoption curve. When we start to see the first driverless vehicles that carry passengers, there's going to be a number of people who say, never once going to set foot in one of those vehicles.
People are rolling coal in the south or whatever, right? Like, yeah. How do you convince those guys with the diesel trucks and the just billowing smoke out that they should just sit back and relax in an ultra-modern self-driving vehicle, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, they're going to coexist for a while.
Right. Yeah.
But eventually, I think the cost benefits, the convenience, and other things are going to outweigh that desire to drive your own vehicle.
All right. I really hope so, because it's honestly like, it's one of those things where you look at it and it seems very promising, but you're right. In the interim, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with sharing the road, and what is kind of the best practice for that?
Well, it's hard. I mean, the autonomous vehicle has to consider every other car on the road as this unpredictable entity. Could do anything at any moment.
Yeah.
Because humans are inherently sort of erratic.
Yeah.
So it makes the problem much harder. It'd be far easier if it were only autonomous vehicles and closed off roads, but that's just not the reality.
Yeah. And is that then like, is there ownership in that future then, or no?
I think that, I think individual car ownership will exist, and probably at some point there will be, fully driverless cars that you can purchase.
And that will coexist with a kind of a shared model like we have now?
Yeah, I think so. And, people are always going to want to have the convenience or privacy or cleanliness or whatever it is they want of having your own vehicle. But it won't be the most cost-effective way to do it. It'll just be a personal preference.
What are some of the benefits that you think people might not realize about what a driverless car future would provide?
I think people will have fewer excuses for not showing up on time.
Is that a benefit?
I don't know. But no, I think that the thing that motivates us and the people at Cruise, our mission is we're focusing on safety and making transportation more accessible. So the big thing that I think is maybe overlooked, maybe not, is that we have an aging population, the baby boomers. Eventually, someone's going to have that hard conversation where they say, "I'm sorry, I need to take the keys away from you." And that's going to be devastating for a generation that ties their identity to having it like a car and having the freedom of being out on the road. And so that's something that we want to fix.
And then also just kind of finally, what about your work with Lyft? Are you guys, is that where we're going to see our first self-driving GM vehicles on the road through that partnership, or is it going to be owned in-house?
We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.